Welcome to the Real Board Loft. I'm Trip Foreman, and this is the Maurice Cole Shiva. Had a great time surfing this board. Actually got to take it with me this past spring to Hawaii as part of a 3-board quiver. And this board, which is a 6.6, also had a Rawson 7.8 sniper and to cover the pig stuff, a Paizel Padillac 10.0 for Waimea and the outer reefs. But this was my go-to board for everyday average conditions in between all the family activities that we did while we were over in Hawaii. So had a great time surfing it all over the North Shore of Oahu, and then actually a couple really fun days on the South Shore of Oahu as well. Talking about this board, it's a new design for Maurice Cole. Pretty flat rocker throughout. Like if you take a look at the profile of the board, pretty flat rocker, hybrid outline, quite a bit of taper in the rail. It actually looks like it has a lot of taper, kind of similar to what he does on his Proto, although not as radical of a taper, but closer to his Proto than he does on a lot of his, then comparing it to a gravel board, which would have a fuller rail. The other thing that is straight up on all of Maurice's boards now is that hard, crisp edge, and it goes from the nose all the way to the tail. Most boards, when you look at them, will have a crisp release off that edge to about here, and then forward of there it really starts mellowing out to where it's just fully round when you get to the front of the board. What Maurice is trying to do on his boards is give his boards more drive and more down the line speed, and so by putting this edge crisp all the way to the nose, it just gives you the feel and the drive that you get off the tail. It basically multiplies that by 2 or 3 times as much drive off of your turns, and drive means projection down the line. And so by running that edge all the way to the front, it just gives you that much more drive out of your turns and that much more speed down the line, which I think is on this board is really noticeable. On this board, and actually all the Maurice Cole boards that I've tried, you just get a lot more speed down the line, the ability to make sections that you normally wouldn't make with a standard rail board. And it also has a very confident, locked-in feel high up on the wave. So it allows you to engage your rail higher up on the wave and to stay up there with confidence, and it just makes the board more locked in and faster down the line. The negative of a rail like that is that if you don't put it on the board correctly, like if you just had a straight down rail with that crisp edge all the way out at the apex of the width, the board's going to be real catchy and grabby and very, very specific in the way that you put it in the water. And if you don't put it in the water the correct way, it could catch a rail and buck you off the board. So what Maurice Cole does in order to make sure that that's not happening is, you can see in the tail of the board, it's pretty much straight down to the hard edge and then over, where when you get to the nose, it's really tucked under the board. So he really wraps that crisp edge underneath the board. I mean, if you're looking at it, it's probably, without having a tape measure here, it's probably tucked underneath 5/8 of an inch past the apex of the rail, and you can see it right in here where it's really tucked underneath the board. And so what that does is it still gives you that crisp release, and it still gives you the benefits of having that crisp release, the extra drive, and also the extra speed, because when you have that crisp edge, the water just flies right off the board. If you have a round edge, the water's going to want to wrap around the board and then go off the board, where if you have a crisp edge, it just goes off the board. So extra speed, extra drive, and extra hold with those rails that are unique from Maurice. So getting to the business end of this board, the big thing about the Shiva is making a board that you can have and surf at home, you can travel with, and you can get a lot more use out of one board. And whether it be a lot more use as far as the range in wave height or the speed of which the wave is breaking, or just your own personal mood, like how you're feeling, if you're feeling ultra radical one day or super cruisy the next, this board allows you to really shift gears and bring out different personalities that are in the Shiva. So this board, it has a 4+1 fin setup. You could set it up as a quad. You could set it up as an equal thruster. FCS makes a fin that I think worked the best for the equal thruster. They make it in the Performer series. It's available in all the different sizes, and it's a toolless fin that just goes into that box and snaps into any standard longboard box. And then with that fin, you can create an equal thruster, or you can create a thruster that has a slightly bigger back fin. And that's the best setup for doing thruster. You can also run a straight up single fin in it. And the last but not least, you can run a 2+1 with side bites in the front and then a center fin in the back. The most popular question on this board is, how does it ride as a single? How does it ride as a single? It's what everybody asks. They see that center fin box, and I think a lot of people are hesitant to commit to a single fin board because they're like, oh, I'm just dropping all the money on the single fin board, and if it doesn't work, I'm screwed. So this is actually a safe way to like play around with riding a single fin and then still have a board that you know is going to rip in the other configurations. But when we rode it with a single fin and then also with the 2+1, the things that were different is that the board, you could trim the board like you would on a standard single fin, meaning like you can high line and set a line, and the board feels good. It's in equilibrium, it feels good, and it'll go, and it'll continue to track and continue to go fast. Where if you have a thruster or a quad and you just like park the board, it doesn't have that same kind of locked in glidey feel. The other thing is that you can stand way further forward on the board with a single fin and have it feel good. Typically, like thrusters and quads, they like you to be locked onto the tail of the board, where this board you could ride it more from the middle with that single fin or with that 2+1 and have it feel good. And so you could do two things with that statement. One of them is we just had a customer in the shop the other day who really liked the fact that it rode well from the middle of the board, because he said I never end up standing up on the back of the board. For some reason, whenever I stand up, I'm always in the middle of the board. So if you're always riding in the middle of the board, like, it's going to ride better as a single fin or a 2+1. The other way is just like the style thing. I mean, if you're riding the board, if you're riding a more old school stance, like from the middle of the board, that single fin or that on purpose, that single fin or the 2+1 is going to ride a little bit better and be more open to that style of riding. As far as the different uses of those, like we talked a little bit about how they perform, but the different uses, I found that the single fin and the 2+1 were really good on slower waves, where you had all the time in the world to make sections and you were just kind of just exploring different lines on the face, and it wasn't like I had to get to this part of the wave in order to make that section. The wave just like broke really slowly. So for example, there was a wave on the south shore of Oahu called Threes, which is mostly a longboard wave, but it was right within walking distance of our hotel, and we just went out there and surfed it. And that wave breaks really slow, and there's actually a lot of longboards there. But the single fin worked great because it just kept you right in the pocket and flowing and cruising with the wave. Where some of the other waves we surfed are faster, and if you don't make the section, then you don't make the rest of the wave. And so on those waves, like a thruster or a quad would be a better setup. With this board, the few different things that I really liked about it is the range of the board. I mean, you could use this thing all the way down to pretty close to full-on gravel conditions, that's because of the rocker of the board and the proportions of the board. The rocker's really flat. It's super efficient with the flat rocker and with these rails. Having all the different fin configurations, I think, definitely helps it tune it to the wave well, like the speed that the wave is breaking. But it also, I'm like a board addict, and so it helps satiate my need to like ride different things without having to bring like an entire van full of boards on a trip. And so I literally could take this thing to a place with average to good waves and ride it as my only board the whole time, and not only have it cover the conditions, but also have it cover the different moods that you would be in, like whether it be the different size of waves, the different speed of the waves, or the different moods that you're in. I wouldn't say it's as high performance snappy as like a full-on like high performance shortboard. It's more of a hybrid, and I would even put it a little bit more on the carvy, cruisy side of the hybrid. So it's not like it's not going to be an ultra pivotal board in the turns. It will do really hard snaps, both front side and back side, and get good barrels and everything else. I just wouldn't put it in the range of like where a squash tail high performance shortboard is. But the ability to like cover all those different conditions, as well as like having the ability to switch gears in the way the board surfs, I think is really valuable. As far as the sizing on these things, this is the second Shiva that I got, and you always hear, like, I think in these reviews it's good to talk about what you liked and what you didn't like. And in my first Shiva that I got, I actually didn't like the board at all. It was too, and in the end of it being it was too small for the design. I ended up getting it like right around my shortboard volume. Plus on top of that, I was wearing like a 4 or 5 mil winter wetsuit, boots and gloves. So you're basically at your slowest of the entire year, getting up to your feet and then riding a board that's too small. And so I talked to Maurice a little bit about it, and he said, this board likes a little bit more volume. Like, you got to think about how would you ride a single, if you are going to be riding a single fin, like how would you ride your single fin volume-wise? And you would never ride your single fin volume-wise the same as the volume on a high-performance shortboard. So we put about another 10% more foam into the board for this one, and it went from like not liking it to magic in that one extra board being made. So think about that when you're sizing the board, is just be a little bit generous on your volume. Typically, like, just to give you numbers, like my standard shortboard is about 39 and change liters, and this board's high 44s. So it's about 10% bigger than what I would ride like my standard shortboard, and even like a couple liters over where I would ride like a high performance groveler. And that works well with the single fin. And it gives you like the glide and the smooth flow, like where you're not always having to be like working, like you can just drive it off the rail, drive it off the speed, and drive it off the size and momentum of the board, rather than constantly be working it, and which in this board I don't think really works all that well. But if you size it right, I think the board works great. So talked a little bit about the size. The other question is the art on this board. My 6-year-old daughter Nova, and I did this art together. I basically drew out the pattern with board sticks, paint pens in black, and then she went back and colored it all with those paint pens. And then when you just take some clear coat, some Ace Hardware clear coat, and just spray a layer over the top of it, and then it's been good to go since then. It doesn't take mad art skills. You just have to take your handbrake off of your creativity. You have to hit the button, drop it down, and then just like release yourself out of the cage and then go nuts, and it'll come out hopefully something like this, or something like this that you like. So those are the board sticks paint pens. That's about it for the Shiva. I like this board. Super fun, really rangy, works in a ton of different conditions, and I'm stoked to hang on to it. This board is not for sale, and that's a good indicator. And if you have any more questions about the Maurice Cole Shiva, you can give us a call at the shop, 252-987-6000, or look us up online, realwatersports.com/surfing. Thanks for tuning in.